Thank you very much for the introduction. Hey, I'm Jackob, publishing technical QA at CDPR, and I'm here with Levente. And today we would like to talk about how Cyberpunk's signature experience was reimagined for the Switch 2 and using motion controls. So basically using the controller to move your character in game. And yeah.
And I'm Levente Kocsi from Jackob. I worked on the design and technical implementation of the motion control system, and I was mainly responsible for the design of the recognition logic, the algorithm, and also the gameplay integration. There is a very long history between our companies, and we always aim to deliver the highest quality of features when we work together. So today, we wanted not just show how we build motion controls, but
how we made them stable enough to survive the production and testing.
So we will start with the ideation and planning, the why behind the feature, then coming with the design principles and decisions, and how that was basically connected with the technical limits and technical challenges, also covering the core development directions for recognition algorithms.
And then we'll talk about and emphasize the extreme usefulness of tooling and the iteration in the process, talk about the playtests we run internally, and mention and talk about how we validated it and measured the success rate, and also how you can bring it to your game if you want.
So let's start with a quick introduction. Motion controls have been in the gaming industry for years, but their reputation was always complicated. They perform good in sport games, VR games, but elsewhere they can be often seen as a gimmick, a technological showcase rather than a meaningful gameplay system. Players can often associate them with imprecision, accidental inputs, or features that feel disconnected from the core experience. But this raises an interesting question. Is motion controls really the problem, or how we design them? Because without the right design direction, motion controls can become what many teams fear will be from the start, a guaranteed failure, a feature that adds complexity without adding real value. So, if motion controls have such a risky reputation, why did we decide to invest in them at all? The short answer is we didn't want motion controls to replace the traditional gameplay. We wanted them to enhance it with a higher level of immersion. In Cyberpunk, if you are grabbing your katana and smashing through your enemies, you can really imagine yourself being a ninja of the dystopian future. But what about feeling like a ninja instead of just imagining it? What if we say you can feel the sensation of chopping through your enemies, you can feel the real satisfaction in your finishing moves and be fully in the moment? Our goal was to bring these feelings to our players, but the technology was new and we didn't know how far we can realistically push this. So we decided to let go with the limits and be guided our imagination and intuition. So first, we started with the design phase, and I was initially testing motion controls with a fake but very useful method. You can always pretend motion controls and push the corresponding buttons for your actions. And in the design phase, it was very useful because you can try out what motions and actions work and what not. And we could instantly see that motions that are very close to the in-game animations are the most immersive. We also needed to define the necessary input structures, and we called them motion patterns. They represent a distinct movement that the player needs to perform. For example, if you perform a slashing motion, that will translate as a melee attack in the game. We was aiming to support the key combat elements like dodging, jumping, the melee attacks, reload, and more. And then we started with a prototype. Here you can see the first prototype video recording. So this was already very hard to validate because we couldn't reach a few technical limitations. We didn't measure the motion continuously throughout the game. Instead, there was a motion recording button which you needed to hold down in order to perform the motion. And the algorithm was only recognizing your movements inside this recording window.
Yeah, and as you may imagine, this was pretty hard for the players. It added the cognitive load, and the skill cap was also really, really high. So like this, we couldn't accept this. We needed to come up with something that would be a little less stressing for the players, a little less involved, that required a little less involvement and would feel just seamless.
Yeah, and because of that, we needed to do a full technical investigation again and come back to the design table later. But we also want to show you another prototype feature that unfortunately didn't make it to the release, and this was vehicle steering. So the platform has a lot of controller accessories like swords, golf clubs, and even steering wheels. This feature was using one, but it only made the controlling harder, not easier, and the layout was also not supporting something like this. So let's dive into the technical part. If you want to fully invest into motion control system, you need to know the characteristics of your device. In our case, we went through the documentation and the sample applications that the platform provided, and we could clearly see that you can only support motion controls if your device has an inertial measurement unit, often called 6-axis sensor. This consists of a gyroscope and accelerometer, and they can measure orientation and acceleration in three-dimensional space. Also, sensors can measure a few hundred times per second, and what happens between those measurements are lost data. You would imagine if you are performing a forward then backward motion, reaching the same position, then the sum of the velocity would be zero. But unfortunately, that's not the case. There is a biggest enemy of all sensory environments, and that is the integration drift. Because humanly performed hand movements are not consistent. So if you are reaching the same position, the sum of the displacement will be slightly shifted in a positive or negative direction, and that's the integration drift. The more humanly accumulated data you transfer, the greater drift you will receive in the end, and that can ruin your feature if you do not overcome it with the algorithm. Also, you need to support a wide range of motions because you cannot expect your players to perform these movements 100% accurately. And you also need to do a distribution based on the sensor data type that you receive, from gyroscope, the rotation, from the other part, the acceleration, and you need two distinct algorithms to define them. Because, for example, you also need to know what you want to recognize. Is it a forward movement of your hand? Then it's an acceleration. If it's just a twist of your hand, then it's a rotation. You can see on the video that the players can also do twisting motions with their hand and also slashing motions, which is a sort of combination of rotation and acceleration. So the first key part of our algorithm is to have a very high reliability because we want it to have the same reliability as regular inputs. We can only build player trust if they trust the feature, and if our feature fails an input, then it can mean life and death in a fast-paced action RPG. So regarding failing an input, we distribute two categories regarding motion controls. There are false positives when the algorithm is recognizing a motion, but the player didn't intend to activate it. And the false negative is when the algorithm didn't recognize the motion, but the player performed it. So our first key part is the recognition rate, and you can see how this later influenced our decision making. We also knew that at the beginning of the development, we need some tooling to represent our motions and the player movements, and about that, Kuba will share more in the iteration phase. So, how do we overcome this big enemy, the integration drift? The key is to have occasional sensor resets and a sampling window. Sensor reset means that all the data, all the displacement that you accumulated gets cleared and starts from 0. That way you can also clear the integration drift. But you cannot do it anytime because doing it in the middle of the motion will ruin the recognition part of our feature. So you need to choose the appropriate time and interval for your resets. Okay, then we know how to overcome it, but how do we start? We start at the lowest level, the sensor data level. So sensors provide their data raw and dirty with all the noise a natural environment has, and you need to get rid of it in order to have a clean, filtered motion of your player. So first, you can use a noise filtering like a low and extreme value filter, and then you still have a very big distraction in your data, which is gravity. You also need to remove the distributed gravity from all 3 dimensions of your controller. Okay, then how do we compare the data samples to recognize the motion? We didn't want each and every sample to compare. We translated them into different structures and called them tendencies. For example, if you perform this forward movement, then this will be an increasing, and then when you are slowing down, a decreasing tendency in your acceleration. And the algorithm can check those instead of the data samples, and that simplifies a lot of processing. In the red box, you can see that the algorithm is checking decreasing and increasing tendencies with a lot of data. They are accumulating displacement, if it reaches a significant value, then it converts into that structure. Also, there is a trade-off, like with every algorithm, and that trade-off is you can increase the samples that you gather for your structures, but that also that gives confidence level for your algorithm, but also increases the recognition delay. And how you balance this feature is the polishing phase of the algorithm. So the other part of our feature is the rotational algorithm, the rotational movements. Here, the sensors provide not the difference between the samples, instead the current orientation of our device. And with that knowledge, we can define so-called checkpoints, which represents an orientation of your controller the player needs to reach. For example, if you perform this twisting motion, then the game will recognize it as dodging to the left side for your character. Also, you need an angle threshold around your checkpoints because you cannot expect your players to perform this accurately. They will either overdo it or underdo it, this motion, and this serves as a bounding box around your patterns. We also need to know a few additional aspects regarding the rotation algorithm, and the first one is to have a neutral position that you can return your controller. You can safely reset your sensors here, basically the same reset as in acceleration. The other one is the trade-off, and you can increase the threshold, the bounding box, but with that, you can support a wider range of orientation, but you need to check the overlapping between those checkpoints so to eliminate the false positive of your patterns. And the last technical part is the combination of these recognition parts. And we could clearly see that acceleration motions are not enough to cover each and every player movement and all the gameplay actions we wanted to integrate. So we decided to change our approach into rotational movements, and it was hard because it happened in the middle of the development. The recognition system was already fully implemented, and then the design changed. But sometimes you better change the design than accept the technical limits, and we had our ex-CDPR colleague and friend, Philip Downer, who was brave enough to guide us into other design approaches. He was our very enthusiastic and passionate designer, and without his experience, we couldn't reach this quality that Kuba will show you.
Yes, and before we talk about quality, we'll talk about quality, but first I'm going to show you the GIF, part of the recording of the playtests we ran. This is the recording from one of the playtests that were conducted closer to the release of the port. And here you can see the player performing the melee patterns with his hand, and he can do it pretty reliably. And this was one of the best sights to see for us, where we could see the players just playing with the motion patterns and using them to immerse themselves in the game and having fun. So that was one of the biggest goals of ours, and we managed to do it because of the iteration. It was the foundation of our work, and the biggest payoff came from the very frequent syncs between the developers, the QA, and the UX research lab that we partnered with in order to conduct the playtests. Anytime something changed, we would get a build from the developers, QA would test it, and then we would run the playtests on the same build. And I'm pretty sure that I'll be stating the facts here, but why it mattered? Because, as you know, in general, the first iterations are rarely perfect. So, and that's even more true for sophisticated gyroscopic and motion-based movements. And you're basically introducing something that players are not used to the game that the players are used to. Because in our case, Cyberpunk is a game that players know very well. It's been out for almost 6 years now, and the players have expectations. They know how it feels. They have the play styles, they have habits, muscle memory, so just basically bringing something that we thought would be cool wasn't an option. We needed to make it as seamless as possible and to feel like an extension to the game. And how the iteration looked like, we had two loops, basically. The internal loop, which was QA, and we started with a very small group of QA with a different background, like gameplay, art, narrative, and they would play the game, evaluate the designs, feedback the designers, and then the designers would adjust the patterns, the motions, send us the build. We would then again test it and make sure that we were on the same page. And the other loop, the next loop, was the external loop. So the playtests we ran with the help of our UX research lab. Because the longer you work on a system, you get used to it. And internally, you have Slack, you have documentation, you can go face-to-face and talk to the developers, and you know what's happening. Players don't have that. So we needed a way to ensure that whenever we have a new player that's playing the game with motion patterns, they can reliably perform them. And as I said, the patterns needed to feel reliable. They needed to be an extension to the game and not feel like a gimmick or like a funny little addition that no one would use. And here's another GIF. That's a part of the motion tool, the tool that helped us achieve like mostly everything we have now on the Switch 2. And here you can see the movement of the right Joy-Con. So basically, yeah, this one. It's from one of the playtests that we conducted early on the development, in the development cycle. And here you can see the green rectangle blinking sometime. Yeah, here, no. So what the participant was trying to do was basically perform a melee pattern, which is like the motion like this. And it wouldn't register, as you can see, because whenever it registers, it blinks, the green rectangle blinks. And I can tell you that the participant was really mad, and the designer was sitting next to the participant, helping them perform the motions. And they would argue, like the participant said, like if you want to do something like this, then it's not going to work because it needs to be reliable. Like the recognition rate would need to be higher because if you do this and you don't have like you don't see the motion in the game, then no one will go into use it. And this, as I said, the tool helped us because without that, I'm pretty sure that the designer wouldn't know what caused it. And there's a brief moment also when the Joy-Cons return to the neutral, the neutral position. So that's basically what we used to have. We used to have like a manual sensor reset. So you would double click, I think it was a left stick, and there's the Joy-Cons would return to their neutral position, which would, like in theory, should help the players with performing motions. But in this case, which was also a part of the argument, the participant was constantly resetting the sensors because they didn't feel like the system was registering the motion, so they felt like, okay, I need to reset it. But it also gave like false positives mostly because the designer, what they were looking for was basically why it fails, and not like, because every time you reset it, they cannot understand what failed, like what part of the system failed. And yeah, this was also part of the argument between the designer and the participant. But in the end, it turned out pretty well because after that playtests, the designers had really had a lot of ideas how to improve the system. And sorry, how we did it. So the first thing that was obvious was we weren't designing for one type of players. We were designing for different audience. Like some players want precision and mastery, and some players want immersion. And those don't always align because yeah, it's hard to align them every time. And the challenge becomes, what do you prioritize? Because you have to make decisions, right? And you need to make them consciously, so that the goal wasn't to create a perfect. It wasn't to create a perfect system, but it was to create a reliable system that both the gameplay-focused and immersion-focused players would use. And what enabled all of that was, as I mentioned, the motion tool. A tool that Inksoft, and particularly one of the engine designer, the programmers at Inksoft, did from the ground. Like he basically wrote it in a few days, basically, I think. And this, like we used it everywhere. We used it for design purposes. We used it for QA purposes. And as I showed you, we used it for even for the playtests. And here is another GIF, a part of the recording from the playtests, and another bug, because right now the right Joy-Con is constantly in the same position, but the pattern for melee again is triggering without the Joy-Con movement. So this was again from the same participant than the previous, the previous screen, the previous GIF, and again, motion tool helped us a lot because without that, I bet no one would know how to. I mean, they probably would know, but they would take much more time how to fix it. Again, another GIF from the playtests. I don't know how familiar you are with the motion patterns on Switch, but here basically you can see the participant in the bottom right corner, and a reference video in the bottom left corner. So what the participant was trying to do was to perform the dodge pattern, and you can see that it wasn't always. Here's the game. Here's what's happening in the game. It wasn't always registering, so they had to perform the pattern multiple times. And again, thanks to the playtests and to the motion tool and like amazing design team we had, we managed to solve that problem. Right now it's reliable, you can do it consistently, and yeah, another fun little bug. But of course, as I'm talking about bugs, there were challenges. Some of them I'm going to talk about now. Defining the view, so that was the biggest challenge actually, because what good actually means. It isn't just technical, that we weren't optimizing for something you can easily measure. We were optimizing for view, and that's inherently subjective. And there were moments where, like, for example, QA would report something working properly or improperly, but the designers would feel like, okay, but it feels okay and it's reliable. And we needed to align on that. And what helped us was a clear goal that we had in mind, that the system needed to be an extension to the game. It had to feel immersive, reliable, and add to the gameplay, not extract something from it. Another challenge was the internal bias versus the player reality. As I said before, the more you work on a system, the more you get used to it. So, and this also worked in our case. It was a case. It was also a case in our case. Yeah, case. Basically, like, as I said, you have Slack, you have conversations, you can go drink a coffee and talk about the system, but players don't have that, and they won't approach you on, I don't know, on the street, and I ask you, hey, how do I perform that and this and that? So we needed to bring external perspective early on, even before we had the designs finalized, and that, again, that's where the partnership with the UX Research Lab and with external people helped us securing something that felt good and reliable for everyone. And the last one, I mean, one of the ones I want to talk about, there were more, the speed versus direction, because our loop was pretty fast. The designers would adjust the system, we would get a build, the QA would get a build, we would send it to the UX Research Lab, and the test would be performed. And that was really fast, because it all usually happened within a day or two, and sometimes even on the same day. And this is powerful, but it also comes with a risk, because when you move that quickly, the feedback flows constantly, and not all feedback points in the same direction. So we needed to stay on track. We needed to keep in mind what we set as a goal. As I said, the system had to feel reliable, add to the gameplay, and increase the immersion, basically. So, what were the decisions and tools and the outcome? Again, the same give. The same bug that I previously showed. Again, the motion tool, it helped us solving the bug. But the technical and context challenge. Because first, on the technical side, interpreting the data, especially early on without the motion tool, it was hard, because QA or the designers would just record their hands with the webcam or whatever, or the mobile phone, as you saw probably one of the first designs that Levente showed. He was basically recording himself with a webcam. And this is hard, because it adds you need to interpret, the designers would need to interpret it. Like, you have a 2D image, and you need to bend your mind to actually interpret what's happening with the Joy-Cons, with the sensors, And that was hard. That's where the motion tool came with the help, and this reduced the abstraction, improved the speed and reliability of the designs and of QA work we did.
Yeah.
And another challenge was integrating the systems to Cyberpunk, because as I said, Cyberpunk is a game that players know inside out. They've built their muscle memory. They got used to it. So we didn't want it to feel like friction. We didn't want it to be a friction. We wanted for them to basically dive in and have fun with the system. So I talked about how we did it, and maybe I'll talk about what we can extract from that and what you can use if you want to do motion systems in your games. But first, another great GIF with a player performing one of the coolest motions, which is basically the knife throwing motion. So you basically, as you can see, you bring the right Joy-Con to your head and perform like a throwing pattern, which is cool. It's also the same for the charge attack. And yeah, just a little GIF that shows how reliable we managed. That shows how we managed to make it reliable. Because even though you can only see them performing the motion once, throughout the whole playtesting session that lasted like 3 hours, they would use the motion patterns pretty often, and they would actually do it reliably and yeah. So how to apply it? So looking back at what I said, it's important to bring new fresh perspectives early on, even before establishing, even before finishing the designs, because as I mentioned, the internal bias, the people getting used to the system, this creates challenge, and whenever you bring someone new with a fresh perspective, you can look at it from a different point of view and adjust it for them. And when it comes to the development process, as I said, it was a layered iteration system, and we had a simple, at the core we had a simple loop. We would get a build, the designers would adjust, we would get a build, run playtests, QA, and just basically do this loop almost all the time. And this is what really helped us, and this is what we believe would help everyone that would like to work on a motion-based system, because it's a system that needs a lot of attention. It needs a lot of
polishing.
Yeah, a lot of polishing basically. And of course, there are risks that come with developing motion patterns. One of the risks is that also Levente mentioned it briefly. Overcommitting too fast. You see something new. You have a sea of possibilities with motion controls, and you think, okay, I'm going to do this motion, I'm going to add this motion, I'm going to adjust that so it feels even more immersive. But at the same time, you just bring in, you're adding complexity to the system. And to be honest, the less complex the motion patterns are, the more reliable they are, and the more people would want to use it. So this is one of the risks, the commitment risks. And another one that ties to the playtesting and the biases is overfitting the system, because, as I said, in our case, we wanted to make it for a huge player base, and we didn't want to fit it exactly to one play style. We wanted to fit it to, I don't know, gameplay-focused people, to immerse, the people that want to immerse in a game. And this is also something that you would need to take in mind, to take into consideration when developing something like this for yourself, for your game. And before we end my part, another recording from the playtesting session, or one that was that we ran closer to the release. And you can see the player doing the strong attack, and also the system is registering it reliably every time the participant would do it. And as you can see, even though the Joy-Con isn't aligned perfectly, because you can see it's twisted a little, and but the system is basically what is it? It's registering the motion, which was great to see when we were close to the release. But what metrics and criteria we used, and recognition, basically. One of we didn't rely on the quantifiable metrics. As I said, we wanted the system to feel intuitive, responsive, and immersive, and that's subjective. But for intuitiveness, we looked at how players interacted over time. Did they hesitate? Did they perform the motions? Did they perform actions correctly? And did they remember the gestures later on? And over time, as I saw the previous GIF, we saw the improvement in that. We saw the players basically performing the motions more reliably. They felt comfortable doing this, and they would see the feedback in game that it was actually registering the motions correctly. And and for example, some of the emotions remove the friction. Like for example, we had the dodge pattern, which without the motion controls, you would need to you steer the player, you steer V with your right stick, but in order to perform the dodge, you need to take your thumb off the thumb of the stick and press, I think, B. And with a motion pattern, you could be moving, you could be using your thumb, and then with your left hand you could be performing dashes, which remove the friction in this example. And the recognition success, because something that Levente also mentioned, we paid really close attention to it. We wanted the motions to basically feel comfortable for players, and we wanted the players to not to pay so close attention to how they hold their hand with the Joy-Con, but we wanted them to just be focused on the game and perform the motions however they liked, and the motions should trigger even though they weren't perfect.
So before we end, we wanted to summarize what you need to keep in mind when you are committing to this type of feature. So first, you always need to build this feature as like other features around your core gameplay area, your core gameplay features, because you need to avoid motion controls to be a gimmick. You want them to be immersive enough to connect it into your game. The other one is there can be very hard technical challenges along the way, like we described earlier, the integration drift, a wide range of motions, false positives. Prepare to face them, and you can always build on your device characteristics.
And the next is, as I said, the less is better. Avoid complexity, and do not fall into the rabbit hole of adding more patterns just because they would feel cool. Keep in mind that it adds to the cognitive load on the players, and it's something that needs to feel like an extension to the game. Like, it has to be comfortable. And another one is to always bring the external people and avoid internal bias. Also something that we mentioned throughout the presentation. The more fresh perspectives you bring early on, the better, because as I said, the bias, you develop bias, and external people help you just basically avoid that bias.
Yeah. So all in all, the feature is in your hands, and we can only build player trust in this area together in the gaming industry. And we hope that you really like this little journey around this feature, and thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.